was also going to present. Window. All right, everybody. We are today, our goal is to cover day 2 of the Thomas Jefferson presidency. When you look at the early presidents of the United States, the one thing you notice is that, and this is true, I guess, of all presidents, but I would say especially true of the early presidents, not all of them are as relevant as the other, right? Like, for example, we look at the presidency of George Washington. Very relevant presidency, like humongous, major presidency. John Adams, his presidency is significant for the fact that it didn't go very well, all right? But then when we get to the third president, the president that we're currently studying, Thomas Jefferson, I would say he's viewed as a good president, but with him, there's positives and there's negatives. But the one thing we can say about Jefferson is that he had a very distinct philosophy that was different than the 2 presidents that came before him. So that's the big takeaway from our lesson yesterday. So let's take a look here. Let's go through what we learned yesterday, and let me really highlight to you what like the big ideas are, okay? You should be aware that the election of 1800 was sort of a constitutional crisis because 2 candidates tied, right? And it took 36 votes in Congress to break the tie, okay? We had to pass the 12th Amendment to solve this first place, second place dilemma in the future, okay? This is a big idea too, and you'll probably see this on your end of the end of the week Jefferson quiz, right? This idea of the revolution of 1800. Thomas Jefferson considered his own election to be a revolution because it was the first peaceful transfer of power from one political party, the Federalists, to his party, the Democratic Republicans. And history had shown that usually when you transfer power from one party to another, anybody out there know what typically happens in other countries when this occurs? Aiden, yes. Violence, civil war, rioting, things like that. So the fact that throughout our history we've been able to transfer power back and forth, that is in a way politically revolutionary, and that it doesn't happen very often. All right. So we talked about Jefferson the man, very smart guy, interested in a lot of subjects. He lived in like a baller house right in Virginia that he updated constantly, Monticello. We went over very quickly Jefferson's inauguration. This is my favorite part of his inauguration. 2 parts. Every difference of opinion is not a difference of principle. What he's saying is it's okay to disagree. That's the nature of politics. That's an important idea, right? People think, well, we disagree, I'm right and you're wrong. Jefferson says that's not the case. And then this is the very famous line that is always written in the history books. We are all Republicans, we are all Federalists. So what's the significance here? Jefferson is in a sense saying, I belong to one party, but I am now president, so I am president for all. Some would say that's lip service and you're just saying it to say it. But this isn't very important for presidents to say, I'm everybody's president, okay? This is the last part that we went over. I would very much say that this one page here with like the ideology of Thomas Jefferson, this is extremely important. You need to know what here is different than the 2 earlier presidents. And I'll just go through real quick, right? The idea that in a weak federal government, a strict interpretation of the Constitution, states' rights, right? Downsizing the Army and Navy, no federal taxation, right? Pay off the debt ASAP. This is super important. The idea of like an agrarian utopia where every American is a small farmer. That was Jefferson's dream, okay? The idea of expansion, make America bigger so that everyone can have their land. And he said that the more that we spread out, he called it an empire of liberty. So when you can spread out and work your own land, that enables you to have the most freedom. Okay. Let's now move to presidential actions. This is our first new stuff for today. First thing he did was he said if you were arrested or if you were brought up on charges for the Alien and Sedition Acts, you are pardoned, which means you are what? Forgiven. The crime never happened. Okay, so he wipes these crimes for, the idea of restricting the press. If you broke that law, you're forgiven. No more federal taxes. We take a look at, this is very important. Jefferson is all about reducing government spending. So he thinks that the government should not have a big budget. All right, let's downsize the Army. Let's cut taxes. Let's make the U.S. government as weak and powerless as possible. All right. So he cuts military and naval expenditures. He takes the Army to 3,000 men, 170 officers. He decommissioned ships. Okay. This is a key idea, cutting the military. I'm going to pose this question to those of you at home or those of you in person. Why does Jefferson fear a military? And why does he want it to be as weak and as impotent as possible? Anybody remote first? Quinn, you want to give it a shot? Go ahead.
So that it can't overtake the government?
Yes. So in Jefferson, and were you going to say the same thing, similar? Jefferson had learned through history that armies are basically tools of tyrants. So if you're a tyrant, if you're an evil president or an evil king or queen, the army is how you do your bidding. So Jefferson said the way that we're going to preserve freedom in America is to make the army small. But we are still going to protect ourselves with militias, part-time soldiers, not this big professional army. All right? All right, so we talked about the national debt. He cut it in half. He makes that a priority. He makes it easier to become a U.S. citizen, right? That was a part of the Alien and Sedition Acts. Here's a big thing. How many of you out there have ever heard of a place called West Point? Okay, we've heard of. Abby, what is West Point? Tell me what you know about West Point.
It's like a military academy.
Yeah, so when you go to West Point, you are going there to become an officer in the U.S. Army, okay? Jefferson wanted a military college so that every person, every American, had the ability to get high-level military training. And a little side note, Jefferson thinks that most of the people who go to West Point will be poor farmers, Democratic, Republicans, people that agree with him. In this period of time, the most popular soldier in America was Alexander Hamilton, and most of the Army was controlled by rich, elite Federalists. So West Point was originally dreamed up as a place where the common American could get into being a high-level or high-ranking military officer. Okay, so what it says here is that Jefferson wanted to republicanize the Army, create a school where all people of all parties and all demographics could come and get military training. West Point is in New York State. It's on the Hudson River in upstate New York. Here is a picture of the campus. Very beautiful. I've never been there, but very historic, West Point. Okay, now, this is going to be, I will say there will be at least 2 or 3 questions on your multiple choice quiz on Jefferson and the judicial branch. The Supreme Court undergoes very significant changes during the presidency of Thomas Jefferson. Let's start at the top. Let's do this word for word. In 1801, when John Adams had days left in his presidency, what he did was he created new federal judge positions that were appointed by, you guessed it, himself. Okay? So, Aiden, I'm going to throw this at you because I think you're a critical thinking kind of guy. Why in the last days of his presidency is John Adams trying to appoint judges? Let's think about this. First of all, how long do judges serve for in the federal government? And underneath the Supreme Court, they serve for life. So politically, think about what Adams is trying to do in the last days of his presidency. Exactly. So if you guys couldn't hear that at home, what Aiden said was that John Adams was trying to pack the federal judiciary or pack the court with as many possible Federalist judges in the government as possible, who would then go on to serve for a lifetime. You think Thomas Jefferson was mad about that? Can courts sometimes become political? Think about recently, the Supreme Court, right? Oh, we have to put a conservative judge there, we have to put a liberal judge there, we're going to block this liberal and put a conservative, that kind of thing. So this was happening as early on as 1801. One party is trying to pack the court, with their judges. So let's keep going. So in history, we call these judges the midnight judges. They call them that because basically Adams is packing the court with these judges like the midnight before he's leaving office, like cramming them in there saying, you're now going in. Okay, now, when Jefferson takes over, he passes what's called the Judiciary Act of 1802. So all those judges that John Adams appointed, and Jefferson basically says, those judges don't exist anymore. We're going to take all of them away, and we're not going to let you pack the court with all your Federalists. Okay? Now, this is the important part. I would argue the most important thing that John Adams did as president, well, he avoided war with France. That was something. But he appointed a new Chief Justice to the Supreme Court. His name was John Marshall. To this day, John Marshall is the most important Supreme Court judge of all time. So he's appointed, in 1800. But to this day, there is no man who does more for the Supreme Court than John Marshall, appointed under John Adams. That's a big idea. Let's read about him. The new Chief Justice, John Marshall, expanded the power of the Supreme Court more than any other Supreme Court judge in history. He's appointed by Adams in 1801, and he stays as Chief Justice until the 1830s. From 1801 to 1830, that's when the court really defines itself as being like a co-equal branch of government, equal to the Congress, equal to the presidency. All right? The Federalist politicians struggled to win national elections. Was there ever a Federalist president after Adams? What do you think? Never was again. And what we saw was that the Federalist Party declined in power over time. But what was the one area of the government that they did have power? The court, because they served for life, exactly. So all those judges appointed under Washington and Adams stayed for like 20 or 30 years. So Jeffersonians took over the politics of the presidency and the Congress, and the Federalists held on to the courts, and that was the balance. Okay, now, let's go over this guy, William Marbury. So William Marbury was a midnight judge appointed by John Adams. He was approved by the Senate, right? But the Jefferson administration, especially his Secretary of State, Madison, refused to give him his job, right? So Adams had given him his job. He was approved, and then Jefferson said, your job doesn't exist. So this guy is mad, right? So it says Marbury sued the Secretary of State, James Madison, claiming that he should receive his judgeship. That court case went on to become the most important Supreme Court case of all time. So if you need to know one Supreme Court case for AP history, there should be like 3 to 5 that you should know big time. But if you can only remember one, Marbury v. Madison is the most important Supreme Court case of all time. So let's go over why. Marbury lost his lawsuit, so he didn't win his judgeship. But the court in the decision established a very important principle in the case. This is the term you need to know. The term judicial review. Prior to the early 1800s, nobody was exactly sure what the job of the Supreme Court was. In the Constitution, it doesn't specifically say what the Supreme Court is supposed to do. What is their job? What is your role in the government? But in Marbury v. Madison, John Marshall basically in the decision wrote what the ultimate job or what the role of the court was. And that has existed ever since. Let's go over that. So judicial review is what John Marshall says is the job of the court. That is the power of the U.S. Supreme Court to strike down laws and government actions that violate the U.S. Constitution. The power of judicial review is not present in the Constitution. So let's say, hypothetically, a president and the Congress work together to pass a law, but that law violates the Constitution. The president approved it, the Congress approved it. In today's world, does the Supreme Court have the right to make that law null and void? Aiden says yes. Connor, you say? Yeah. Jack? Jesus? Yes. So today, that is the main job of the Supreme Court. When they feel like an action taken by the government or a law passed by the government is unconstitutional, the Supreme Court has the final say in analyzing the Constitution. What does it say? What is this law? Does this law or does this action violate the Constitution? And they can either, rule to uphold the law, or they can rule to nullify the law, and then it goes away. This is really important in today's world. So, for example, gay marriage, was not approved by Congress. It was not approved by the president. Gay marriage was legalized in all 50 states by the Supreme Court. So when somebody filed a lawsuit saying I should be able to get married. It's a violation of my constitutional rights to prevent me from getting married. The Supreme Court looked at the document, and the 14th Amendment says that all Americans are ensured equal protection under the law. So the Supreme Court used what was written in the 14th Amendment, equal protection, equal laws for equal people, to say that you cannot ban gay marriage, and as a result, gay marriage is legal everywhere. So does everyone understand how major things like that have been approved, or it's been sort of clarified by the Supreme Court? And then once the Supreme Court says gay marriage has to be allowed, can anybody override the Supreme Court? Not the president, not the Congress. So just be aware that that judicial review is a very important concept, okay? So that's kind of the big take there. Okay, so here's a little quote. I think this is from the actual Supreme Court building. It says, "It is emphatically the province and duty of the judicial department to say what the law is." So politicians have the right to do whatever they want. They can pass and do whatever they want, but the court is supposed to be there to be that final referee, that final filter to make sure that our Constitution is being followed. Okay. All right, now let's go over let's dig deeper into the presidency of Thomas Jefferson. Okay. So the first big event that I want to go over with you is what are called the first Barbary War. Okay. Have any of you ever learned anything about the geography or what Northern Africa is like? Anybody know anything about North Africa? What kind of culture exists in the most northern aspect of Africa, right here? Anybody know? Okay, you should be. Hey, go ahead. What do you think I'm trying to get at here?
I know, like the really northern ones, they're kind of like parts of them are similar to Europe.
Not some of them are similar to Europe, but I would say there's another area of the world they're more similar to. Jesus, you know? It's Mediterranean. There is definitely, because it's all in the Mediterranean. But like today, what's the dominant religion of Northern Africa? Northern Africans. Anybody know? Jack? It's Islam. So what you see is that these countries in Northern Africa right here, Morocco, Algiers, Tripoli, right? Even Egypt, right? Egypt is in Africa. These are Arabic countries, right? But they have a Mediterranean flavor, right? They have a few other things, but they're predominantly more like Arabic countries than anything else. And then you have the Sahara Desert, then you have sub-Saharan Africa, which is a completely different culture. So be aware that in the 1790s and in the early 1800s, these Northern African territories, they weren't countries. They were little provinces run by pirates. And guess what? When our American ships would sail into the Mediterranean, guess what these Northern African pirates would do to us? What do pirates do? They steal. So during the 1790s, a big problem we had was that pirates from these North African countries kept robbing our ships. So how do you get a pirate to stop robbing your ship? Anybody know what European countries and America did at this time to prevent that from happening? If you want to stop the pirate from stealing, what do you have to give to the pirate? Think about like the mob or the mafia. You got to pay me off. So since the 1790s, European countries and America had been giving money to North African countries, basically saying, here, we're going to give you your yearly allowance, and you're going to let our ships go by freely. Jefferson did not agree with this. Jefferson said, we're not giving these pirates any money anymore. So guess what the pirates started doing again? Take a guess. Quinn, what did they start doing?
Looting and stealing.
Yeah, they started stealing from our ships again. So what Thomas Jefferson did was he sent the newly formed U.S. Marines to North Africa to fight against these pirates. And that war, and I'm not going to read through all this, but that war where we sent soldiers, Marines, and Army and Navy to North Africa to stop those pirate attacks, that is called the First Barbary War. Have any of you, I don't know, at home or in class, have any of you ever heard the official Marine hymn? Kind of like a very song. It says like from the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli. You know where Tripoli is? Tripoli's right here. So that Marine hymn is celebrating when Marines were sent to North Africa during the presidency of Thomas Jefferson. Any questions before we move past the First Barbary War? So just be aware that even though Jefferson is anti-military and he wants to shrink the size of the military, he gets us involved in a military conflict with North Africa. Okay, because he doesn't want to pay the bribes. Okay, now, another big thing I would be aware of if I were you. I don't know how many of you have ever heard of the Caribbean islands or the Caribbean countries of Haiti and the Dominican Republic. These names ring a bell? Were all of you aware that Haiti and the Dominican Republic were all on the same island? Okay, so if you didn't know, let's take a look at these islands here, right? So Haiti is the western part of the island, and the Dominican Republic is on the eastern side of the island, right? Haiti has a very interesting history. During the French Revolution, the slaves in Haiti had a huge uprising in the 1790s. And what those slaves did was they kicked all the French plantation owners off the island. So the origin of Haiti is that it was a country formed by slaves after a successful slave rebellion. This is the first time this had ever happened in the history of the world. A country was formed by slaves who rebelled. Now, I'm going to ask the class or you at home a question. Why were people like Thomas Jefferson so afraid of what happened in Haiti? Jefferson was scared to death about what had happened there during the 1790s. Quinn, explain that to me.
Because he himself had owned slaves, and if they were able to make a whole what is it, like a
country
yeah, to themselves, then they could also form an army and take down Jefferson and all of that.
So Quinn, let me ask you, if the slaves in Virginia find out about what happened in Haiti, do you think that would inspire them to do the same thing?
Probably.
Exactly. So what we see is that there are several slave revolts that occur in the early 1800s in America. And the leaders of all those revolts, even though they fail, all point to Haiti and say, that is what we're trying to do here. Okay, yes, go ahead. Oh, okay, cool. So here's the thing. The people in Haiti were fighting for their independence. They were fighting for their freedom. And they actually asked the United States, please help us out, acknowledge us. Did Thomas Jefferson claim that he loved freedom and he loved republics, where there was no king? Yes. Did he support Haiti? Hell no. Okay, so this is a little bit of hypocrisy here, but Jefferson did not like the idea of a country run by slaves and what that could do in America in terms of race riots. Okay. Now, let's talk about the biggie, okay? When you look at the presidency of Thomas Jefferson, okay, there are two huge major presidential acts that you have to be aware of. In Jefferson's first term, you need to know about the Louisiana Purchase. And then tomorrow, we're going to get to something called the Embargo Act. That's the big action of his second term, all right? So that other stuff that I taught you is good to know. It's good to know his ideology. It's good to know about his election. It's good to know a little bit about, maybe know about West Point. But you need to know about Louisiana. You need to know about tomorrow, the Embargo Act. So let's break this down. All right, first, let's take a look at this map of Louisiana, okay? We're all aware that today Louisiana is a state, right? And the state of Louisiana is down here. We're all aware that when we talk about the territory of Louisiana, we're talking about Oklahoma, Arkansas, Missouri, Kansas, Nebraska, Colorado, Wyoming, Montana. Is that a large territory? Yes. So let's take a look at this. So this area here was the United States before 1803. Would it be fair to say that the Louisiana Purchase doubled the size of our country? That'd be fair to say, right? Okay, so that's a lot of land. Secondly, who is living out here in Louisiana when we buy it? Anybody know?
The Native Americans.
Yeah, so Quinn, it's pretty much only Native Americans. So we buy it from France, but there were no French people living there with the exception of a city down here called New Orleans. The rest was uninhabited by white men, inhabited by Native Americans. Okay. All right, let's talk about Louisiana real quick. This territory originally belonged to France. Then France gave it to Spain. So then it became a Spanish territory. In 1800, Spain secretly, without the knowledge of Americans, gave it back to France. So this territory, because nobody was really doing anything with it, kept flip-flopping back and forth, and nobody really knew what to do with it. All right? So let's focus on some of the important things here. Okay, let's focus on this. This is an important part. It says Napoleon's plan was to reestablish France in the New World. So when Napoleon Bonaparte takes control of France in 1799, Napoleon was kind of like Hitler in a way. Hitler wanted to conquer the entire world, put the whole world under Nazi control, right? Napoleon wanted to put the whole world under French control. So when Napoleon takes over, Napoleon looks at North America and says, I want all this. I want to send armies over to the Western Hemisphere and conquer it all right? So it says the Haitian Revolution caused France to abandon the idea of an empire in the Americas. So Napoleon looks at America and says, I want to conquer all this. But when the Haitian Revolution takes place and the slaves on Haiti are successful, Napoleon, let's go here where it says, the French army sent to Saint-Domingue, that's Hispaniola or Haiti. His army was decimated by yellow fever, and a new war between France and Britain seemed like it was on the horizon. So Napoleon tries to recapture Haiti. He fails. He sees that Britain is attacking his ships. So what Napoleon does is change his course. So once the French failed to recapture Haiti, ownership of Louisiana wasn't really needed. Like, he kind of said, well, if I'm going to give up on the Caribbean and I'm going to give up on this part of the world, why am I holding on to Louisiana if I'm not doing anything with it? Okay. And what happened was Napoleon needed money for his other military objectives in Africa, in Asia, and in Europe. So because of that Haitian Revolution, because the French can't recapture Haiti, Napoleon says, this part of the world, I'm done with it. Okay, so here was the original plan. Thomas Jefferson offered $10 million just for the city of New Orleans. Anybody know why geographically New Orleans is such an important city? Anybody know? Jack, what do you know about that? Yeah. So does the Mississippi flow from south to north or north to south? Do you know? North to south. So where does the Mississippi River empty out into like the ocean or the sea? At the city of New Orleans. So do you see how if you control that city, you control all the river traffic on the Mississippi? So Jefferson wants to buy this down here. But because Napoleon had given up on an American empire, the French counteroffered. They said, listen, how about this? If you pay us $15 million, you can take, instead of just this, you can take the whole thing. Is that a once-in-a-lifetime kind of deal? When you gain land like that, usually you have to fight wars for it. This is like a one-time pass, $15 million, take it, and you can double the size of your country. That's like never going to happen again, right? So basically, the Louisiana Purchase doubled the size of the United States for 3 cents an acre. Unprecedented deal, okay? Now, here's the problem. Anybody want to remind me what Jefferson's view of the Constitution was? What did he say about what a president can and can't do regarding the Constitution, Jack? Go ahead. The president, very literal. Is there anything in the Constitution that says the president can buy land? What do you think? There's not. Did Thomas Jefferson violate his own principles to buy Louisiana? Yes, he did. Historians give him credit for that, but he is a hypocrite. Like he bashes everyone for flexible interpretation, and that's what he does to buy Louisiana. How about this? We just doubled the size of our country. What about slavery? Are we going to have slavery out there? That's going to be the new fight, right? And then how about this? Where's the money coming from? Did America have $15 million sitting around? What do you think? Quinn, who was that person who set up this financial system and said we needed good credit and a national bank to be able to prosper as a country? Who was that?
Hamilton?
Hamilton. Did Jefferson like Hamilton?
No.
Did Jefferson like Hamilton's financial plan?
No.
Did Jefferson use Hamilton's financial plan for his greatest presidential achievement?
Probably.
Yes, he did. No. So we borrowed money through the National Bank, and we were able to borrow that money because of the credit we established because of Hamilton. So Jefferson's greatest achievement came because of Hamilton, okay? Does that make him look like a hypocrite? Yes, but once again, it's a great moment, but it shows how as president, you sometimes have to be flexible. You can't always have these principles that you never deviate from, all right? So let's go down to here where it says the Louisiana Purchase was an expansion of executive power, of presidential power. Did Jefferson believe in a strong or weak presidency? So Jefferson believes in a weak presidency. So what's he do while he's president? He empowers the presidency, right? So we see a bundle of contradictions with Thomas Jefferson. He says one thing, he does another. All right, that's a big, big takeaway with Jefferson. Okay, so let's read this together. It says, historians credit Jefferson's decision to purchase Louisiana as the best moment of his presidency. Significance: Jefferson wanted Americans to have more freedom, more opportunity, and enough farmland for every white man to have his own small farm. The Louisiana Purchase is considered the greatest land deal in history. It created less European competition on our continent. Any questions about the Louisiana Purchase? We think we're good there? All right, guys, I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but we've all heard of the Lewis and Clark expedition. Be aware that Thomas Jefferson bought Louisiana without knowing what was out there, right? He bought it sight unseen. He bought it blind. So what Jefferson did was he sent two explorers, military men that he trusted, out to Louisiana to see what he bought. Okay, these two men were Lewis and Clark, right? So they start in Missouri. They go through the Great Plains. Then they hit the Rocky Mountains here. After the Rocky Mountains, they are able to catch the Columbia River out to the Pacific Northwest. So what are the big achievements of Lewis and Clark? They explore the Louisiana territory. They interact with Native Americans, and they found a route all the way to the Pacific Ocean overland, which we've been trying to do for quite a while. All right. I think that is a great spot to stop today. All right. Any questions before we go, my remote people? All right. Tomorrow, day 3 of Thomas Jefferson, our final day. Make sure we are working on our vocab words, and you will have a multiple choice quiz on his presidency. For those of you at home, please do your vocab assignment before you do your quiz, because a lot of your vocab words are related to your quiz questions. All right, so that will help you. All right, guys, thanks for coming. I'll catch up with you tomorrow, okay?
Bye.
See you. All right, let's end this, and then we can chat about anything else that we need to.